In this video, I'm going to teach you how to go from 0 to hero when it comes to the reverse Nordic curl. So we're going to look at going all the way from the starting level right up to being able to do the full movement with clean form from the floor all the way back up, 4 repetitions, otherwise known as the natural human leg extension. Stay tuned and let's dive into this. So before we actually get into the technique itself and the movement and how to progress this, let's take a little look at what the movement actually is, because some people think it's just a stretch. Some people realize the strength benefits of it. Well, in actual fact, it is considered an outer range exercise or a long range exercise. Now, it took me a little while to grasp this concept as well, but essentially this just means that the muscles being targeted are being targeted in their maximum length, so in a stretched position, as opposed to a shortened position. So you have movements that span the entire range. For example, a front squat, in the case of quads, will be more of a full range kind of exercise, whereas a conventional leg extension, when you're sitting on a machine where you have a flexed hip and then you are straightening out at the knee joint, this would be shortening the quadricep from both ends of its attachment. So this would be an inner range exercise. And in comparison, the reverse Nordic curl would be an outer range or long range exercise, because again, as you can see, the quad is fully stretched from the knee joint and it's also fully stretched from the hip joint. So this movement will be targeting the muscle in its entire stretched position. And now that we kind of understand what this movement is, or at least what kind of movement it is, let's talk about the benefits you may receive from training this movement. So the first thing here is obviously improved mobility. It goes without saying that many people can't even sit into this position, going all the way down where they relax their bum, back and head onto the ground, let alone lift back up. Funnily enough, I didn't even realize this was a thing. I got into yoga many years ago, and obviously I knew about the hero pose, which is what this is when you're at the bottom, but I didn't realize that you could lift up and down out of the movement for reps. You know, that kind of blew my mind when I first realized, but I didn't understand the benefits of these movements myself either. So I saw people doing it and I thought it was just some kind of cool party trick. But as time has evolved and as I've experienced myself, there are a slew of functional benefits and real world benefits that come from this move. Athletic performance will be the first thing we'll look at in terms of benefits here. This is because loosening up the hips and quads will give the glutes and hamstrings a lot more chance to work optimally. And anyone who knows anything about athletics and performance will know that the glutes and hamstrings are key players when it comes to jumping, sprinting, and anything of that nature. So many athletes in any kind of sports end up what we call quad dominant and hip dominant. And this just basically means that the quads do lots of work, so do the hip flexors, and the glutes and hamstrings end up weak, and therefore there's an imbalance at the hips. And usually what ends up happening here is it's a given that you end up with achy knees, knee pain, or even knee injuries down the line. So this is a great reason to start getting your active ranges of motion in the reverse Nordic curl better, particularly if you've got any interest in any sporting endeavors across any variety. You do not need to be a sprinter or anything like that. This could be as simple as just being a recreational mountain climber or liking to hike better. All things will generally benefit from being more mobile in this position. A really quick example from this, empirically speaking, was when I did my 3 Peaks challenge earlier this year for my 30th birthday. One thing I changed from when I last climbed those mountains, when I climbed them all in one go, was my quadricep based training. So my sissy squat game improved, and so did my reverse Nordic curl game. They both improved alongside one another, and as a result I found that my down phase in the mountains was just easy. I was almost just bouncing from rock to rock to rock, and I could run down the mountains, whereas previously speaking the ascent was always kind of easier and the descent was just a nightmare. This time though, I couldn't really choose between the two as to what was easy, because they both felt really manageable. And now for a slightly sexier benefit. This is where we look at hypertrophy and muscle growth, so making your quads look bigger and more defined. The reverse Nordic curl, believe it or not, I have found to be quite a good hypertrophy builder for the quads. It certainly gives you that nice sweep that runs down the inner thigh, or even towards the outer part where the VMO is. Certainly puffs up your legs a bit. Now obviously don't get me wrong, it's not going to be as effective as some other exercises, i.e. leg extension on a machine for sheerly just blowing up the quads, but we have to look at a bit of a trade-off here. So we have to kind of meet in the middle and compromise. We are getting long range strength and more mobility, which will help us be a better human down the line, but we're also building muscle in the process. So there's a little bit of 2 birds, 1 stone going on, whereas my argument is just training leg extensions on a machine isn't really going to make things good, because you're going going to increase the size of your quads, but you're also going to increase the resting tension in your hip joints. And that is only going to lead to tighter hips and probably shut the glutes off more unless you're offsetting this in the right way. And finally, there are some good studies and some nice research coming out recently to suggest that the reverse Nordic curl being used for soccer players and field athletes is a really useful tool for bulletproofing the knees against injury and reducing knee pain. I'll link a couple of studies down below in the description box for you guys to check out if you feel so inclined. And this will lead us nicely to what is good form, what is bad form. So there are loads and loads and loads of examples of this movement in inverted commas, supposedly a clean reverse Nordic curl, where you'll see only the back of the head touching down and a massive arch where they look like a speed bump as they lower down and coming back up. This is not what we're looking for. The reason we're not looking for this form is because this involves an anteriorly tilted pelvis, an excessive arch in the lumbar spine, and not enough knee flexion. When I first started doing this movement, I thought I was better than I was, and I was using this form. Lo and behold, I wasn't getting any quad gains, and I just felt like my low back was doing all the work. When in reality, what we actually want here is we want a posterior pelvic tilt where you squeeze the glutes and the glutes stay on throughout, and you try to find a straight line from your kneecap going all the way up through the thigh, crossing the hip joint, going through the torso, along through the chest, the shoulders, and even right the way up to the ears. That you sustain all the way throughout the movement, which includes on the descent, of course, but also on the ascent. We need a nice ascent that looks the same as the descent, as if you was rewinding a video. This is what it should look like for optimal function, because this will involve keeping the hips open, the glutes on. You'll get a full flex of the knee, which will involve the quad lengthening fully, and then you'll be building strength when the quad is at its absolute longest position, as opposed to some kind of crappy hybrid movement where you're essentially just cheating because you just don't have enough range of motion there to begin with. Another way that people butcher this movement I found is that they can get quite nice eccentrics. They can lower down real nice, and then when they come back up, they kind of curl through the spine and use the abdominals too much, where they round their way forwards and don't maintain that open hip position. This is just a classic sign of the quads not being strong enough on the concentric yet. So that is something to be really mindful of as well. You have to keep the spine at least neutral. There might be a little bit of curving on the way up when you first unlock this movement, but it shouldn't be excessive, where you see the shoulders starting to move notably in front of the hips. So what about prerequisites for training this movement? Are there any standards that you should have before you start looking at this movement? In my opinion, there really isn't. I think it's a good idea to get training it regardless of the mobility level. Obviously, it goes without saying that it does help to be able to at least passively sit into the full stretch, because that at least shows that you've got the range of motion that you can then strengthen. But if that isn't the case, it is perfectly fine to work on the stretch alongside the strengthening techniques. So you would just hold the stretch, and you want to build up to 60 to 90 second holds, maybe even 2-minute long holds, just to where they become a little bit more comfortable. And you can really relax back rather than it being an all-out fight, even if that involves laying on blocks or having your elbows down to assist. But it's definitely preferred to try and work your way down passively to eventually being able to just hold it on the floor with relative comfort. This can take a little while depending on how tight you are through the hips. Some people are blessed with being able to get down there first. To be honest, I never struggled too much with this movement. It was just the strength side of things that I needed to work on. I always had quite good passive mobility here, but you may be different. But it's always a good idea to try and have some flexibility here, at least passively to start with. Now, when it comes to training techniques, there are really only two schools of thought here, at least two common methods you see. The first one is the banded method, which I first encountered way back when I first saw this movement, using a thin band attached to a bar or anything that you can hook it on, and you just lower back and use the band to help you out of those outer parts of the range that's most difficult. And the other method is training it to a block, so a marked increment that is higher up than the floor, so just working in a range that you can actually demonstrate some control in. Now, when it comes to which one is better and which one is worse, I can speak from real experience here. I spent quite some time working with the bands and I got nowhere. So only over the last, say, 3 to 4 weeks have I started doing this to blocks or a marked target, and hence this video is born. You can see that I can do the full movement, although not perfectly. It's still a work in progress, as everything always is, but I've really made some accelerated progress with this move over the last few weeks, and the only thing I did different was ditch the bands and start working on the target. So just working to a block, always marking where I am and then working my way down lower over time. So are the bands the devil that they're made out to be, a lot of people like to attack bands and say that they're pretty much useless. I don't think they're quite that useless. They are very, very good if you can access the position passively, but you don't have a lot of strength down there. It's a great way to get the feeling of exerting force out of that bottom and beginning to teach the body how it feels to rise out of the bottom from that stretch position. Because when you first start training this, you will literally feel like you weigh 1,000 pounds on that floor. Just creating any movement whatsoever will just be nigh on impossible. So the bands can really help with that. Also, the bands aren't so bad providing you abide to the following rules. So you must use the same band every time you train it and the same setup. This can be problematic if you visit different gyms, different parks and different environments. It's not always easy to standardize things. And this is why I made no progress here, because I was hanging the band at different heights. I was placing my knees relative to the band in different positions. I was even holding the band in different positions day to day. And on top of that, your body will find ways of cheating with the band because it will manipulate the arm position, which will change the leverage mid-set. Your body's very clever and it doesn't want to make things harder than it needs to be. And with the band, because the band can be moved around, your body can easily find its way into a cheated position. So nothing becomes standardized. It's all very random, and hence your progress is also random. And in contrast, training it to a block, even if you're training up real high and struggling to get to 45 degrees, the real difference here is that you have to exert force. The band can't help you. So you really get a flavor for what it feels like to contract back against the force and against gravity to come back up. That was the game changer for me. There was really no compensation. I either made it up or I didn't. And you can soon screen where your position is, where you pretty much cannot come back up with good form anymore. And then you just set the object slightly higher than that. And there you go. You've got your working ranges of motion. You standardize that for your sets and reps count, and you progress it over a sensible time frame. Which segues us nicely into the topic of sets, reps, and frequency. I have really found that this movement is a low rep exercise, despite what some people say. They say obviously the quads being slower twitch, they're more of a volume muscle. I would agree with that in different positions, but I think in this long range position, because it's very hard at first, I think this is a 3 to 5 rep exercise, 3 to 5 sets. So very much a classic strength training template applies to this. 1 to 2 times a week is more than enough. A grease the groove approach can work quite well on this, I found, for experimentation. What I would do is I would set a timer for 30 minutes, do my work in front of the computer, sitting at a desk, etc. And then I would get up, move around, do some mobility drills, and I would throw a rep of these in every half an hour or so. Just one rep, one good quality rep where I maintain the body line and all the form cues. And this really did speed up my progress, because obviously you are practicing the position you're trying to learn. It's like a neural greasing. There's a reason Grease the Groove is famous, but it does work well on this, providing you don't hammer it too much, because it's a stretched position. And you do find that stretched positions tend to be a little bit more stressful on the body, or at least I've found that. But that is something that can also accelerate your progress, as long as you do this sporadically and don't go crazy. That said, that is the end of the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, just give me a thumbs up. That would support the channel. That would be brilliant. If you're not already subscribed and you like this kind of content, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as I plan on bringing you many, 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 many more tutorials and videos, all pertaining to flexibility, mobility, strength training, calisthenics training, and just being a better human all round. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace out.